Hey guys, what's up? Dingo Crikey here with another commentary video, and this one is going to be directed at people who have never watched the Transformers cartoons, basically people who are new to them, and giving my top 5 recommended shows to start. Whether you're totally new to Transformers, maybe you've only watched the movies in the past, maybe you've only bought the toys but you've never watched any of the cartoons over the span of the last 30 years, this is basically a video letting you know what might be the best cartoon to start with. I would like to note that while I'm going to try to be objective in this video, remember it is a personal recommendations list, so my opinion is probably going to affect it to some extent. But it isn't a personal favorite list. I do try to take things into account, such as what might be the best place to start for someone who has no background knowledge, what shows may be considered dated to newer audiences, what might have the most general appeal, and one more thing that I would like to note. There really hasn't been one consistent continuity throughout Transformers. It's kind of rebooted itself as far as the cartoons go, like 6 or 5 times by now. So if you skip in and watch a show that was made in 2002, you're not going to be like spoiling anything from the past 18 years before that. If you want something with a more long-running consistent continuity, maybe you would look at IDW's comic books. But anyways, here are my top 5 recommended shows. Number 5 is Transformers Beast Wars. This show is a personal favorite of mine. It's got a lot of really cool characters, probably the best diversity in regards to personality that we've ever seen in a Transformers show, a lot of great character conflict, all of that kind of stuff, especially within the good guy cast, which in this case, instead of being the Autobots, are the Maximals, and in my opinion, it probably has one of the least archetypical cast in Transformers. The characters are a lot of fun, and they grow throughout the series. This show probably has some of the most extensive character development in Transformers, though some characters stay pretty much the same. Other than that, you've got a lot of cool storylines, from episodic storylines to long-running things that continue throughout the series. We also get a good amount of world building throughout the series, especially in regards to technology or certain artifacts, things like that, other races. Obviously, being a cartoon primarily directed at young boys, you do got a good amount of action throughout the series. Probably isn't going to be the best action for a lot of modern viewers to watch, but you still have it in there. I should mention one of the big selling points for this series is often the good balance between humor and drama. It's really what the series seems to be noticed for, so if that sounds good to you, Beast Wars may be the best pick. Now, I would like to mention that Beast Wars does have a lot of negatives for certain people, especially for new viewers, because it's a kind of weird show, and that's really the best way I can put it. There are definitely some stylistic things that are kind of odd, some things because of its time period, being a 90s cartoon. The animation's pretty dated, some of the humor can be a little bit annoying at times, even some of the characters. It may even take a second viewing to really appreciate them. The biggest reason that this is so low on the list, despite me thinking it's a pretty good show, is that there have been numerous people I've heard from, whether in person or online, who, when getting into Transformers, just skimming through the different cartoons, have given Beast Wars a chance and have absolutely hated it, or maybe just couldn't get into it. I mean, even my first time around, when I would see clips from Beast Wars and tried to watch some episodes, couldn't really get into it. It was really when I, kind of matured and opened up to different things, I sat down and could appreciate the show for what it is. So that's Beast Wars. Number 4 on my list is Transformers Armada. This is another one that is a personal favorite of mine, and it was the show that got me into Transformers, so I may be a little bit biased, but I do think that I can justify its place on this list. It's a pretty simple show for new Transformers fans to follow, and I think will set you up with a lot of the basic aspects of Transformers and kind of give you the general feel. You've got your Autobots versus Decepticon conflict, a lot of your traditional characters such as Optimus, Megatron, and Starscream, but you do have a different take on them in this show. Without getting into spoilers, there is a major character that is introduced later on in the series, and by major I mean that this character is kind of an important one throughout basically all Transformers fandom, and I think at least a lot of people would agree Armada would handle him the best, and I think they do a pretty cool storyline with him. It's one of those shows that starts out really light and does get progressively darker. As far as the characters in this show, it doesn't have the best, but it definitely has its standout characters. For example, unlike Beast Wars, I actually think the good guy cast is the weaker one in this show. We do have some good ones such as Hotshot and Optimus, but most of them don't really go anywhere. On the other hand, I think the Decepticon cast is pretty good. They're sort of like a dysfunctional family. You will get a few episodes that focus solely on the Decepticon cast. Also, if you're into anime, this is probably the best of the Transformers anime series. Outside of the ones that weren't dubbed into English, I wouldn't know anything about those as I've never watched them. I will say that this series is probably the worst in regards to the translation. The dubbing in this show is pretty bad. We do have some good voice actors, but you could tell the lines they were given in the translation didn't turn out so well, so you have a lot of odd moments. The dialogue will even be swapped for certain characters, just weird stuff. Also, America ordered the show when it was unfinished, so we have a lot of bad animation, probably the worst in those regards, maybe right up there with Generation 1, so take that into account when watching the series. Other than that, I can't think of a whole lot to say. Not the best Transformers cartoon by a long shot, but it's a decent one and it will probably be pretty good for new viewers. The next one on my list, number 3, is Transformers Animated. Now personally, I'm not into this series quite as much, but I do know of a lot of people who really like it. The best way that I could sum up this series is, as opposed to Armada being an anime, if you're into American action cartoons, especially from the 2000s, such as Teen Titans and Ben 10, this may be your fix. I mean, from what I observed watching this show, everything from the animation, the way the Transformers fight, the characters' personalities, their voices, even the way characters are introduced, feels a lot more like those kind of cartoons as opposed to typical Transformers cartoons. Also, every character in this show has a super distinct personality and a voice to go along with it, and this even goes for some of the more minor characters. This is a show where you don't always have the conflict between the Autobots and Decepticons in every episode, so you'll have some episodes that take a seat back and will just take a journey through one of the characters' past, and I think they do this for about every one of the 5 main Autobot characters, or at least most of them. Aside from just backstory episodes, you'll get a lot more character-centric episodes than you would in previous cartoons. That's kind of just the show it is. As I mentioned, this show also has the least of the typical Autobots versus Decepticons every episode format, so the Decepticons kind of are in the background, at least especially in the start of the series, and you have the Autobots dealing with a lot of other threats, such as other groups of robots and even humans who want to fight against them or cause chaos throughout the city, mad scientists. Despite being so different from the rest of the Transformers cartoons, it does have a ton of homages to previous Transformers incarnations. Personally, I found it to be pretty overbearing, but maybe it would help a newer fan to be familiarized with the Transformers franchise. The tone of the series can actually shift a lot from light to dark, and I would say as the show goes on, it probably overall gets progressively darker. One more thing I want to note without getting into spoilers is that this show didn't really have the intended ending because it was cut short, so you may be a little bit disappointed. If that kind of stuff really bothers you, just keep that in mind. Number 2, I have the Transformers, or for simplicity's sake, we'll call it Transformers Generation 1. Of course, the original cartoon. This is another one that isn't necessarily one of my favorites, but for whatever reason, a lot of new fans seem to really take liking to the series. Whereas a lot of the time period's effects on Beast Wars seem to be considered dated or unbearable for a lot of new viewers, a lot of people seem to enjoy the corny 80s cartoon charm of Generation 1, and personally I find that that's the best way to take this series. You've just got to accept that the show can't really be taken too seriously. While you do have some good plot lines and some cool characters, it's an 80s cartoon, and a lot of modern viewers can't really get into that the same way that they enjoy modern cartoons. But if you enjoy it for what it is, a lot of people seem to really like it, so that's why I'm kind of putting it here. Another reason for Generation 1's place on this list is because it is the original show. It lays a lot of those foundations. You'll get familiarized with the most important and relevant stuff in the Transformers universe, all your basic characters. You'll get a lot of your big concepts such as Vector Sigma, Unicron later on, Orion Pax. Speaking of Unicron, I would like to mention that the series is kind of split into two parts, and that is by the 1986 film. A lot of people may just want to watch seasons 1 and 2 of the series that were before this film because it makes drastic changes to the series, and a lot of people weren't happy with them. Personally, season 3, which comes after the film, was my favorite of the show, as I thought a lot of the new characters had more sprightly personalities and the storylines were a little bit more interesting. That's my own personal take. Most people seem to enjoy the first 2 seasons much more, and I think you can get away with just watching those. That's all I have to say about Generation 1. My number 1 spot goes to Transformers Prime. If for nothing else, this show's going to take the cake in the list just because it seems to have the most wide appeal in the modern age. I mean, the show even won several different awards, so it's liked among critics, Transformers fans seem to like it, and a few outsiders seem to be able to get into it as well. Most people seem to be able to agree that Prime is at very least a pretty good show, and I know for a lot of Transformers fans, myself included, it was Prime's tone. As Transformers Prime, it finally gave us that dark, more mature tone that a lot of fans had been wanting for years. Dramatic backstories, character deaths, epic soundtrack, and while personally I found it could be sort of melodramatic at points, a lot of people seem to be totally down with it. The show does go through a whole bunch of different plots throughout the series, sort of like the new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon. The show neither has one overarching plot, nor does it have a bunch of episodic stories. It's more like a bunch of more self-contained stories spread out through the course of different episodes. The characters also seem to be a major source of the appeal for this show. Personally, I didn't find them to be as interesting as everyone else did, at least in most cases, but you will get a lot of backstory episodes. You have some conflict between the characters, not as much as you would get in Beast Wars, definitely more on the Decepticon side. The characters do grow throughout the series, some more than others. Now, one more thing I would like to note, the show is like 60 some episodes, and some of the plot lines can feel kind of drawn out, especially because in comparison to some other shows, the series doesn't have a ton of characters, so it may feel a bit stale at points. On a final note, one of the biggest reasons that this show is ranked so high is because of its production quality, and the fact that that can probably appeal to newer viewers a lot better than the production quality of many of the other cartoons. The CG is probably still up to today's standards. This show has hands down the best fight scenes in all of Transformers, and it's on a pretty consistent basis that we will see good fight scenes. You have some incredible voice talents in this show. The writing is really good. Overall, the production quality for Prime is great, and I definitely think it would be the best show to start off with for a new Transformers viewer. But depending on what you like, you can kind of pick out any show on this list. I hope I represented them well and could kind of give you an idea of where you may want to start. If you have any additional questions or comments, you can of course drop them off in the comment section below, along with any suggestions for future Transformers videos. You can keep up with the channel for more regular Transformers videos, commentary, figure reviews, anything Transformers related, and that's all I have to say for this one. Thanks for watching, stay tuned, and have a good one, guys. I'll see you soon.